All right. What's up, everyone? This is Ryan here, and we are live for episode 6, I believe. I've already lost count. And yeah, so today what I'm going to be doing is I do have a fairly lengthy but really awesome question that I'd like to get to. And what I'll do is I'll probably answer a couple of questions just from viewers and mess around a little bit, because one thing I've noticed is that at the start of these streams, it usually takes me about maybe 5 to 10 minutes for my mouth to start catching up to my brain. So, yeah, just kind of get used to the first couple minutes of each of these episodes. If I have kind of like announcements to make, I'll make announcements, which I do have a couple. But if there's a little bit of just blah 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 for the first couple minutes, understand that I'm just trying to warm things up, warm my mouth up. Excuse me. Yeah, warm my mouth up, warm my brain up, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, welcome to the stream. So first and foremost, before I get into questions, lately what I've been working on is I've actually been rebuilding my recyclerview tutorial. So what's going to happen is basically the first application, let me just make sure, yeah, that's working. The first application tutorial, or I guess I should say the first tutorial I ever made on YouTube, was actually my recyclerview series. And basically, although I'm quite happy with how well I did with it at the time, because it was over a year ago, and I definitely was not as good of a programmer as I am now. So there were some things in it that I wanted to change, and I kind of just decided, you know what, why don't I just redo a whole new app, redo a whole new tutorial, and just kind of start from scratch and sort of take some lessons that I hopefully have learned from the previous series. And yeah, so watch out for that. Possibly, I might even start releasing some content for that tomorrow. It'll just kind of depend on how far I get today. Anyways, let's have a quick look at the chat and see if we have anyone. What's up? We've got Suman from Nepal stopping by. Thanks for joining me. All right. So yeah, so that was the main thing. There's going to be a new recyclerview tutorial coming up. Now that recyclerview tutorial, basically a lot of the UI for that is going to be going into my next full app tutorial, which is going to be forgettery, which I've already talked about it and showed it on the screen and all that kind of stuff. And so basically how that's going to work is the recyclerview tutorial, not only is it a tool for teaching the recyclerview, but it'll also be kind of the front end for forgettery for the most part. I'll be taking a lot of the UI stuff that I build in the recyclerview tutorial and putting it into forgettery. So what is forgettery? I've mentioned this quite a bit, but I've been kind of vague in my I've had some sort of written explanations of what this thing is, but just, you know, kind of briefly, what I want to do is this app forgettery. It's partly, it's not really. I don't know if I'm going to ever publish it. Basically, it's a glorified note-taking app. Now, what I plan to do with it is a couple of things. I want one medium scale to small scale application which I can point sort of people who are on the spectrum of like beginner to intermediate. I would like an app where I can kind of point them and be like, hey, if you're looking to kind of take stuff to the next level, if you've gotten the basics taken care of, like you've got the basics of Java, or Kotlin, you've got the basics kind of handled, maybe you've built a simple app or two, where do you go from there? And in my opinion, the place that you go once you have kind of some basic stuff down, and I'll be talking about that very extensively soon, the way that you kind of go from the place that you go from there is you want to be building an app which is not necessarily super complicated, but you want to be working with data and data storage, because as soon as you get into a setting where you're, you know, paid to build Android apps or anything kind of like that, one of the most important skills, whether you know how to work with a realm database, whether you do SQL, whatever it is, you're going to want an app, or you're going to want to be able to build apps which save data, and you're going to want to learn how to do that well, because there's so many ways to do different things in programming. And I've, in my personal experience, tutorials help a ton, and you should, always, study other people's open source code and stuff like that. But also, for my own personal learning, a lot of what I learn comes from just diving into something like SQL Open Helper, or diving into Realm, or diving into Retrofit. Kind of just jumping in, getting it working. Don't worry about doing it really well the first time, but just focus on getting it working at first. And in that, you will start to see how you can do things better. And the cool thing about that is when you work with tools, sorry, I'm just going to position that. When you work with these tools, what you'll start to do is you'll start to learn how to work better with them in the code itself versus like reading about it and theorizing. You will practically know. That's what the issue is, sorry. You will practically know kind of what to do there. Sorry, I'm totally OCDing over this thing. Okay, that's good. Leave it. Anyways, let's see if we have any questions. What's up, Cypher? Good to see you. Oh, Honey says he subscribed to me to watch tutorials, not these QA videos. So I'm not sure what you expect me to do with that information, but I'm glad you shared it. Still no questions, so I can kind of keep padding this out. This is usually the part of the Q&A episode where I remind everyone that it is a Q&A, so if you're a beginner, if you have any questions about Android, blah, 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 please do ask. And in the meantime, what I will do is I think I'll open up Calculator and, or what should I do? I'm just trying to think. Yeah. Well, what I'll do in a couple minutes if I don't get any questions is I'll jump into my big question, but I was actually hoping to do that sort of a little bit later on because it's going to be a fairly long answer most likely. The thing that I keep mentioning here is I got a question from a fellow, and I won't answer the question yet, but basically the question is, how do you get started with Android development? So let's say you're an absolute beginner, maybe you don't even have a lot of experience with Java, you're really, really new to Android. How do you kind of get started? So that's the question I'll be answering a little bit later on, but possibly sooner than I would like. But, and what's up? We've got Daryl joining us as well, who's a regular of the show and a good friend. So Sushil is asking, could you do tutorials about how to write libraries in Android? So that particular idea, so I don't have a huge amount of experience. In fact, I don't have any experience writing libraries. However, I actually do have a project planned where basically what I would like to do is I would like to write my own sort of Java/Android simple calculator kind of library or API. So I do plan to do that eventually, but we're talking probably at least 2 or 3 months in the future. But API building is sort of a subset of programming that I've been looking to get into, and so I will be doing that eventually. Okay. Okay, interesting. So I've got a question from Saman, which is a good, let me just write that down and then we'll go over that. That's a good question. So let's see here. So is Firebase, let's see. All right. So I'm going to paraphrase the question just a little bit. Let's go back to code mode. So the question was basically, is it good practice, oh, come on. Good practice to use Firebase? And there was kind of an extra part of that question, so let me just double check on that. Okay. And kind of the second part was that, so the second part of that is kind of, you need, I'll just kind of, I'll talk about how kind of true this is, but the other part of the question was like, you need to pay for extra services. I would say services / bandwidth. And let's see here. One last double check. So you need to services or use other server code. Okay. Okay, do you need to pay for other services, and can you use your own server code? Okay, so this is a really good question. So basically, the question is it good practice to use Firebase? Now, this is an interesting question, and the reason why is that, so really, really quickly, let me summarize for the beginners what Firebase is. So, I'm trying to think. I'll do my best. This is all off the top of my head, so just bear with me. But basically, Firebase is a back-end, a multi-platform back-end service, I'll call it. Maybe that's not the best definition, but just, kind of bear with me here. So Firebase is a multi-platform back-end service. So what does that mean in simple words? So normally when you're building applications, apps, most applications you use that are, I will say, enterprise, business apps, or something like that, it's going to need to be talking to some kind of remote server or computer. Really the same thing. So I'm trying to think of a good example. So for example, if you've got the Facebook app on your phone, it's going to be sort of talking to Facebook's API, of course. And basically the gist of that is you've got sort of cloud storage and you've got a server, you're talking and you're sharing data with cloud storage and another server, in a nutshell. Now there's a bunch of different ways you can go about doing that. So if you're kind of, I believe the technical term is, if you're a full stack developer, you'll be a person who can write the phone app, and that includes Android, it includes iOS, it might possibly includes Microsoft. Maybe. They unfortunately kind of missed the boat on mobile, and things of that nature. So if you're a full stack developer, you're going to be writing both the app, the devices app, and then you're going to be writing the server side thing as well, which, yeah, so that's basically it. Now, what is Firebase, and how is that relevant to what I'm talking about? Well, if you're in a position like me, where maybe you'd like to eventually learn, like I want to learn how to write a backend server and all that kind of stuff, but at the moment, my focus is on building Android apps. So yes, I could invest a ton of time and resources into learning how to write my own backend server, which can talk to different platforms, and it is possible to do that. But the important question here is, do you want to? And is there a way to get around that? So my first experience with these kind of third-party back-end service kind of things, I'm trying to think, I'm sure there's a word for things like parse and Firebase, but it's escaping me. Maybe Daryl or someone could think of the word for me. So how these things kind of work is what I can do. Let me pull up Profiler. Just 1 minute here. Unfortunately, while I open this thing, it's going to lag a little bit. I do apologize about that, but it is what it is. So let me just open up Profiler, and we'll have a quick look at Firebase in the context of an application. And that thing is chugging away. Okay, hopefully it's functioning okay now, so let's hop over to code. So let's talk Firebase. So this is Profiler. It's basically a social media app which leverages Firebase. It will be a social media app. At the moment, all it allows you to do is create a user and a profile and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, I think it's called Firebase service. Nope. What is it called? Firebase, no. Okay, I'm just gonna have to go, I can't even remember what I called the real one. Okay. Firebase auth service. So basically how this thing works is what I can do is I can set up an account with Firebase. I can sort of register an app or create a project on Firebase, and what that will do is it'll give me a unique key, a unique key for the project. Now, once you've got one Firebase project, let's say you've got a mobile iOS app, you've got a web app, and you've got an Android app, and these are all under the umbrella of one Firebase project. Using the unique key for the project and kind of putting it in each of my different platforms, I can have a situation where I have a iOS app, a web app, and an Android app all talking to the same database, all talking to the same service. So how that works then is, let's say I release an app on multiple platforms. All of a sudden I can, I do need to, the implementation for each thing is a little different, but since all of these things are talking to one service, it basically makes it so that I'm only managing one back end, so to speak. So that's kind of I've kind of gone around, babbled quite a bit, but basically that's Firebase in a nutshell. It's a backend which you can pay for. Now let's get back to the actual question at hand. That was just sort of a basic description of how Firebase works, and let's get to the question itself. So is it good practice to use Firebase? Do you need to pay for its services? Can you use your own server code? Questions like that. So for starters, is it good practice to use Firebase? And what are the question behind this is, what are the benefits and deficits of using something like Firebase? Or if you've heard of Parse, I actually worked with Parse before I worked with Firebase. Parse was a deprecated backend which was managed by Facebook, but it ended up just dying for reasons I'm not entirely sure of because it worked pretty well, but now we have Firebase, which seems to work equally as well or better. So, is it good practice? What are the benefits and pros and cons of using Firebase? So naturally, whenever you're using a third-party solution versus writing your own solution, really the two things that you're going to need to think about is with the, I forget which hand I used, with the third-party solution, probably you're going to have a lot of the work done for you. They're usually really convenient at the expense of being configurable. So you're going to have less control over it. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If it has really good defaults, it's not necessarily a problem. So that's the first thing. With a third-party tool, it's generally going to be more convenient. Like, all I needed to do was set up a simple Firebase project, hook it up to my Android app, write my own single little service class, and then I was creating users in a cloud database. And the Firebase docs are really good. If you're curious about Firebase, go look at their documentation. It's generally quite good. So the next thing is, but with with your own solution, it's going to be, you're going to learn a ton. You're going to have way more control over what you do. However, there are quite a few drawbacks to doing your own solution. If you do it poorly, if you write your own backend server poorly and it's not secure, you risk compromising people's data. You can learn how to make your data safe, but that's the thing, you need to think about. Yeah, it's just the general gist is that you are going to have a lot of work on your hands if you want to develop a backend which talks to an Android app, which talks to an iOS app, which talks to an Android app. So that's basically the first thing, or that's the main thing here. So how Firebase kind of works is they can start you out with a free plan. I'm not an expert in how their pay scales work or anything like that, but they'll give you a free plan or a free, I believe it's an allotted number of calls to the server per minute. And how that kind of works, the way that they make money is, let's say you release like an app and it takes off and you implement it with Firebase. As your app grows, as the bandwidth requirements of your app increases, you will have to, if you want to increase your bandwidth, you will have to pay Firebase more. So here's kind of the second trade-off. With a third-party solution, as it increases in scale, as a general rule, I think it's safe to say that it becomes more expensive. With your own home-baked solution, so to speak, if you know what you're doing, you can like rent a fairly cheap server space, and you can kind of, I think in the long run, as your app grows, it will be a lot cheaper, like in terms of money. However, in terms of maintenance, you're gonna have to do that. So that's another thought. Really what I'm trying to give you is that there's different things you need to look at when you say, is Firebase best practice? Let's kind of get one more point and then I'll move on because I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. It's kind of a rambling kind of day. I apologize about that, but I just got to keep the train wreck moving. And the last thing is, can you use your own server? Can you use your own server code, which I believe was the question. And unfortunately, I don't know exactly. Like, it kind of takes, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I don't really know, to be honest. I don't know the extent to which you can customize Firebase because I simply haven't had a need to do that. The last point, and for real this time, the last point I'll end on is, don't be afraid to use Firebase. If you don't know how to write a backend, don't let that stop you from like writing an app which uses it. These tools are made and supported by Google or Alphabet or whatever, Firebase in particular. It's designed to be used for people who either don't have the time, skill, or resources to write their own backend. If you don't have that, by all means, use Firebase. So I'm going to shut up now and let's move on to another question. Okay, so Daryl has very kindly given some extra information here. So what I'll do, we're at low video output. what I'll do is I'll just read some stuff out here. Yep. So, for example, so something Daryl has mentioned is that like you can use Firebase, or you can, like, for example, write a server with Node.js and use Socket.io for messaging and an open source real-time database. So the thing is, like, it's one of those things where if you have the time to do stuff like that, you should. But if you're in a enterprise, if you're in a business and you don't want to pay people, you don't want to pay like a backend developer, maybe that would be a better case to use Firebase. There's no answer like use Firebase, don't use Firebase. It depends on your use case, all that kind of stuff. He had a couple other, yeah. Yeah, and that's basically the gist of Firebase. So let's see what else we have. There was a couple other questions. So what I'll do is I'll answer one more question and take a quick break. And then what we'll do is I'll get into my prepared question from comments. But let's just find one more good question here. So oh, this is an interesting one. Let's do this. I like questions like this. So let me just slap it in. All right, so Herbert has asked, and this is kind of a neat one. What do you do if you are a perfectionist and want to constantly improve your old code when you need to move on? So that's kind of this will be a fun one. I'll do my best with this. So what do you do if you're a perfectionist and you want to constantly improve your old code when you need to move on? So what I would say, this is something I can relate to a degree, because I actually spend a lot of time when I have the time, and that's really the most important thing. Excuse me. Hit puberty again. So here's the thing. Refactoring old applications is generally a really good use of your time. So I can relate to that. I spend a lot of time refactoring. Like, let me give you an idea here. POS Trainer, this application here. POS Trainer, which has gone from a really ugly, shitty, poorly built app, which I made over 2 years ago, to something which, it's not a... Oh, sorry, I opened up Profiler like a goof. Apparently I closed POS Trainer. Okay, whatever. So POS Trainer was like it's the second app I ever built. And I've rebuilt POS Trainer probably about 7 or 8 times. I've rebuilt it. 2 or 3 times from complete scratch. So I think it's really important to go back and fix your old code, particularly in smaller projects which you can kind of fix quickly. And the reason why is that, well, there's so many different things. I think if you've got that kind of stuff on GitHub, you don't want to leave crappy code on GitHub for extended periods of time. Maybe you don't always have time to fix it, but that's just the first thing. But, how do you balance that, the desire to go back and fix all your mistakes, and to just be a good programmer, to write good code, and to want all of your code or most of your code to be well written? How do you balance that with getting important stuff done? This is very relevant to me, this particular question, because at the moment I am in a position where, except for weekends, I have on average 2 hours to code a day, which is not ideal. I have to be very selective, and not unfortunately, but oftentimes that 2-hour window which I have between like 6:30 a.m. and 8:30 a.m., a lot of that time will be spent answering questions, doing social media stuff, so oftentimes it gets condensed even more. So what I do is I will write down on paper, okay, today with the whatever amount of time I have, what is the most important thing I should do? And why is it the most important thing? And if I catch myself wanting to deviate from that most important thing, so to give you a practical example, what I would like to do, what I wanted to do this week was finish Pause Trainer. It's close to being done. I want to finish it. It frustrates me that I don't have time to finish it. However, I said I was going to redo my recyclerview tutorial this month. What have I done? Every day this week, with the little amount of time, I've worked on my recyclerview tutorial with the small amount of resources and time I have, because at the end of the day, as much as it's great to follow your passion, follow what interests you, yada yada yada, blah blah blah, at the end of the day, if you have goals to make money, if you have learning goals, work towards those goals. At the very least, start and spend like an hour on your biggest or most important task, and then do the messing around. Do the refactoring when you have the spare time. That's basically the gist of that question there. So yeah. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, have a sip of water, and then I'll probably get into this question here. So let's play an ad. And also, if you're watching this and you've enjoyed the content so far, I would really appreciate it if you would hit the like button down below. All right. So one thing Daryl asked me, do I plan to do work with machine learning? Absolutely, although unfortunately I don't have time. I plan to do that in approximately 4 months. Basically what my plan is for this channel and for my learning goals is, first and foremost, I need to make money. This will be kind of funny. This is totally off topic, but oh, is it still visible? Oh, there's that friggin' seagull. Yeah, piss off, buddy. Sorry. These seagulls like to land outside my window and go, ah! And it just makes me want to scream. So I just thought I'd share that with you. I don't know why. Do I plan to do work on machine learning? Absolutely. And I'll be doing... so I used to play a lot of StarCraft Brood War, which I refer to as the StarCraft that didn't suck. Actually, I'm just kidding. StarCraft 2 is okay, but I like Brood War a lot more. And I think Brood War will have a lot more lasting... Well, we'll see. I think there is an AI library for StarCraft 2. Anyways, I will be doing content on building AI and machine learning. And that is a direction I will be moving this channel. The thing is, because I won't be able to do that until I quit my day job. I really won't. So that will happen when I make enough money to sustain myself. And I expect that to occur within 6 months to a year, but you know, I don't have a magic crystal ball. All right. So what I'll do, Respect Tech is upset that I didn't answer his question. Let me get to it after. Anyways, so let's get to my prepared question. Okay. This is going to be an interesting one. So the other day, someone posted a question on some post I had about some video, blah blah blah, and it was really interesting. It was a great question. It was a question I've been waiting for someone to ask. So what is that question? Now, I'm going to try and be a little more succinct than I normally am. Normally, would go all over the place on this, but as you've probably noticed, my brain isn't working 100% today. It was my friend's birthday last night, and I ate a bunch of cupcakes. And the problem with me eating a bunch of cupcakes is because of my metabolic type, it actually makes me dumber. It actually makes my brain works less efficiently. So, I've written a bunch of notes, 2 pages in fact, and my hope is that by the end of this, if you're a beginner watching this, this will help you. So what is the question? So the question is, and this is kind of funny. So I'm kind of paraphrasing it a bit, but the question was from our friend BOLO Einstein, which is a pretty baller name. Just as a tangent, I'm not sure how many people have watched Bloodsport or Enter the Dragon, but in those movies, there's this actor named BOLO Young, who was this. I believe he was a Chinese, or I'm not sure if he is from Hong Kong or where he's actually from, but ethnically Chinese, I believe. Bodybuilder in Bloodsport and all this stuff. So when your name BOLO Einstein, I'm just kind of picturing like this really jacked Asian bodybuilder with Einstein's head on it. But that was a total tangent. I just thought I'd share that bizarre thing with you. You know, like 30 seconds into this question, I'm already tangenting into random shit. I apologize, but you know, bear with me. So what is our friend BOLO asking? All right, he's a newbie. This is his actual question. Dude, I'm a newbie. Can you tell me the first way to learn basic Android development? So, how do you get started learning? Why is that still there? Yeah, you go away. I thought I deleted that. How do you get started building Android apps if you're a complete newbie? For this question, I am going to assume that the person I am giving this answer to isn't even that solid with Java. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer this question in 2 parts. In part number 1, I will give you 5 steps which are like a sort of high-level roadmap, a map to follow. How you get from point to point to point on that map is going to depend on life and you. But what I want to do is start by giving you a general overview, a general map of how to go from 0 experience with Android to writing a simple app and deploying it or something like that. In part number 2 of this question, I will give you the same 5 steps, except I will give you what I think is very practical information. If you are following this right now or you're watching the recorded version, my suggestion would be to take some notes, whether you do it in Notepad or something like that. Rephrase each of these steps into terms that make sense to you. That is a learning tool, rephrasing, resummarizing. And yeah, and that's basically my suggestion there. So let's get into it before I start rambling more. How do you get started with Android apps? Part 1. Part 1, step number 1. And each step might have multiple points. Step number 1, learn basic Java and learn XML. That's the first thing. Now, you might be asking immediately, well, should I learn Kotlin? My suggestion to you is to go watch the video I made recently, which is titled, Should I Learn Kotlin? Go watch that video if you would like to hear if I think a beginner should learn Kotlin or should learn Java to start with. I would explain it here, but I explained the whole thing in more detail there. So that's the first thing. Learn basic Java and spend like an hour, because it's really not complicated, spend like an hour learning XML. Step 1. Step number 2. Get a Hello World app running on a device. So that could be a phone or it could be an emulator. Doesn't really matter. Deploy an app to some device. Step number 3. Pick an app you would like to build. I'll get into more practical details on this, but the main thing is pick an app you would like to build. I would strongly suggest you pick a simple application. And the reason why is that when you are an absolute beginner, and I am speaking from personal experience because this is where I started as a developer. A tiny bit of Java. I knew what XML was. That was about it. Pick an app which is simple. The first app I picked was a workout log. And you can build a workout log simply, and that's cool. Whatever idea you choose, maybe you've been thinking about an app for a long time. My suggestion, get rid of most of the features, only basic functionality. And the reason why is that what you'll find is that since you're a beginner and you're learning, you'll have to learn so much at the start. Even implementing like a basic view, like a spinner or a recycler view, that could be a 2-week learning process. So you want to keep it as small as possible so that you can get a simple app running as fast as possible. So that's step number 3. Pick an app you would like to build. I'll give more practical info on this in a bit. Step number 4. Set a deadline and get to work. Actually, I'll mention the practical stuff in a bit, but that's step number 4. Set a deadline for the app you decided in step number 3 and start working on it. Set a deadline. I'll talk about how the practice of that in a bit. And the final step, step number 5, is once you have built your simple application, it's running fairly well, not necessarily perfectly, it's not necessarily beautiful, consider uploading it to GitHub or even publishing it to the App Store. Why do I suggest that? A number of reasons. For starters, once you have a basic app on GitHub or the Play Store, you could even at that point start applying as a junior developer to certain places. You're not necessarily going to get hired, but if they see that you've got an app, that you've built a concrete thing, that is a major bonus because it shows initiative. It shows that you took the initiative to build something, whether you're going to get paid for it or not. So, and that's basically that's part 1 of how to get started with Android apps. So what I hope I've done is I've given you a broad process you can use to follow. Let's talk about part number 2, which is, all right, you've heard me babble about vague, broad terms. Now at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, Ryan, you've given me a list of things, but how do I learn Java? How do I learn XML? How do I use the how, implementation details. Let's talk implementation details now. And again, these are the same steps in the same order, except now I will be giving you practical advice and information and resources for each step. And this is really what I wish someone had given me when I was starting out. But I had to be stubborn. I had to do everything my way. I had to learn by beating my head against every wall until I either broke the wall down or I found another piece of wall to beat my head against. That's how I learned. That has benefits and disadvantages. I really wish someone had sat down and explained this to me. So let's get started. Step number 1, which was learn basic Java and learn XML. All right. So if you would like to learn basic Java, you need to brush up on your Java skills. My personal suggestion, all of these are suggestions. They're not rules or anything like that. My personal suggestion is to watch YouTube tutorials, look at free tutorials on the web. You can learn everything you need to know for free on YouTube. I don't personally have Java tutorials. I will be doing that eventually, but I don't have time to do it now. But learn basic Java. Again, Kotlin is a thing now. For the next couple years, because Kotlin is a new language, most learning resources are going to be in Java. So that's why I suggest you start with Java. So that's the first thing. Use YouTube. Learn your basic Java. How do I learn XML? Let me teach you XML in like 2 minutes. It's really not that complicated. Let's talk XML really, really quickly. I'm going to pull up a random thing. This is an XML file. You'll notice that most XML files start with this thing up here. I don't remember the names of these things. I think this is like a header declaration. I don't care what the name is. It doesn't friggin' matter to me. Almost any XML document will start with this header thing here, which denotes that it is an XML document. And of course, like I'm trying to think of what you call that, the character, some kind of text formatting, universal text format, whatever. This is just like a standard. I guess XML 1.0, I don't know what that means. It doesn't matter. So most XML documents will start with this little tag. And the reason why they do that is, XML it's a markup language, which is based on the same thing as HTML. So an HTML document is, of course, going to start with HTML and blah, blah, blah. You don't necessarily need this thing. In a lot of the layout files you'll write in Android Studio and other things, because Android Studio is very good at determining XML files. So if I were to, I believe how this works, like for example, if I were to include, say, fragment, include maybe layout, let's just say fragment display. Let's say I did that. Well, since this tag, I'll explain what a tag is in a minute. Since this tag is being included in a document which already has this declaration up here, the file I'm referring to doesn't even friggin' have. Notice how fragment display doesn't have that top header. It doesn't need it. Most modern compilers are very good at deciding when you need or don't need this thing. All of these things, an XML document is mainly comprised of tags or elements, you might hear them called. I like to call them tags because I don't know what element has to do with anything, but whatever, I didn't decide it. So each of these tags, an XML tag, it can be, you can put stuff between it. You can have a tag that's closed, whatever. And so that's a tag or an element. And the last thing you need, the second to last thing you need to know is that each of these things are attributes. They are little things you can set, you can configure. XML is almost entirely, what's the word? Declarative, I think. Hopefully I'm not messing that up. But you have to tell it exactly what to do, and it doesn't let you, obviously you don't want to be misspelling anything. Otherwise it's going to say that something's wrong here. And the last thing about XML is namespaces. So for example, and here's what a namespace is. Let's zoom in real friggin' close and I'll explain what a namespace is. So Android text, blah. Tools text, blah. So how does this work? It's really simple. XML is basically something, you make XML up entirely. Basically, like, it is probably like the most flexible, there's nothing to it. There's barely any rules to it. So you decide on this stuff. So the final point is that sometimes when you're dealing with XML documents, you'll run into a situation where an attribute, you might have multiple attributes with the same name. A perfect example is using either the Android namespace or the tools namespace. What a namespace is, and you can see it up here, all it is it's just, this is how am I trying to say this? If you would like to have multiple attributes with the same name, but you need to differentiate them, otherwise you'll get errors, give it a namespace. That's XML. Let's move on. So that was step number one. I just taught you basically everything you need to know about XML. Let's go to number two, which was, number two was get a Hello World app running on a device. All you need to do that is download Android Studio. Honestly, at this point, I'm just gonna flat out say, don't do Eclipse. ADT, the Android Developer Tools plugin for Eclipse, is deprecated. It's no longer supported by the Android team. If you are an expert and you really, really, really want to use Eclipse, by all means, go ahead. If you're a beginner, don't use Eclipse. And this is a strong opinion, but don't listen to people who say that you should use it for some reason. I know that's a very strong opinion, but use Android Studio. Or if you're an expert and you're used to working in IntelliJ or Eclipse, make your own decisions. This is for beginners. Okay, use Android Studio to create a new project. So all you're going to do, you're going to fire up Android Studio. You're going to go to, one way of doing it is File, New Project. You're going to give it a name, project name. You're going to give it a domain or a package name. So this is something that's useful if you're, this is how you kind of differentiate your app. The common convention is if you have a website, like I do, you can say something like com.wiseass.forgettery, which isn't actually my website. This is just a unique identifier. If I didn't have a website, I might say com.ryan.sampleproject. This, you decide what you want there. It doesn't matter. Yeah, sample proj, pick a location, doesn't matter. Start with API 16, that's good. Pick an empty activity. Do all the defaults. I'm not going to actually make it, but you can finish it. And that's how you get a basic app project going. And once that's done, you should basically just have to set up an emulator, which you can do in the AVD manager, or you can use a phone. And you basically should be able to just deploy the Hello World thing that Android Studio gives you. That's how you do that. Step number 3. And this is a bigger one. Step number 2 is pretty trivial. All right, so for step number 3, pick an app you would like to build. So if you are not sure what app to build, my first app, I decided to build a workout log. Why did I pick a workout log? I was exercising at the time, and I knew it was something that I could use. Maybe it's not, maybe my workout log was terrible, the first one I built, and there are better solutions, but I picked something that I was going to use. That's a hint. However, if you're not sure and you don't really care, pick either a calculator or a simple note-taking app. Something really simple. Almost every friggin' developer teacher out there does, on Android, does a note-taking app as their simple app to show you. So the reason why it's such a good app to pick is because a note-taking app shows you how to make a simple front end, and it requires some kind of data saving. If you would like to learn from me personally, I have a tutorial called Beginner Android Development Tutorial 2016. Sorry, it's a playlist on my YouTube channel where I show you a hello world and I tell you what an activity is and the simple stuff. And then I take you from that to building a simple calculator with a simple model view presenter architecture. It is an older tutorial and there's a few things which I'm a bit vague on, but that might be a good place to start. I show you how to build the whole friggin' thing for free. And if you like that, please hit the like button on those videos. It would help me out. So that's one thing, but you can, find other people. If you don't like the way I teach, find a different tutorial. That's cool. If you have money, which I didn't at the start, pay for a nice, well-structured course that has good reviews. That's a perfectly valid option. I'm broke as shit, so I learned all this stuff for free. So, and the last... Yeah. Yep, so that's basically pick. So number 3, just to wrap it up, pick a simple app idea. And, if you pick a calculator, you can follow along and build something like mine. Or you can just do what I did, which is just think of your own idea and just dive in and then use tutorials as support. Do whatever you feel like doing. Step number 4, set a deadline and get to work. So this was a big challenge for me. So when I started with Android apps, which was in the summer of 2014, I was working full-time with split days off, and I wasn't very good at managing my health or my time compared to now. So here's the main thing. I just totally lost my train of thought. Step number 4, you should probably aim for 2 weeks to a month with your simple app idea. Do 2 weeks to a month as a deadline for step number 4. You've picked an app in step number 3. Now we're setting a deadline and we're building the thing. My suggestion is 2 to 4 weeks for the first iteration, alpha or beta, whatever. Do 2 to 4 weeks. Why would I suggest 2 to 4 weeks? This is going to vary entirely on you, your resources, your energy levels, your time management skills. When I started, I only had, again, about an hour a day to build this thing. Except for on weekends I had more time, obviously. And it turned out that it took me about a month to build an ugly alpha version of my first workout logging app. Here is the most important thing about this first app you build, and this is really key. Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry about it looking great. Don't worry about things like that. Your first application is a learning tool. You can come back and rebuild it into something cool, but for the beginning, there's this really frustrating thing that so much is going to be so new to you and so difficult that you have to put your blinders on and say, all right, let's just get this thing working. Now, when you're better at being a developer, let's say a year in, you don't necessarily want to just slap code in and just get things working quickly. But as a new beginner, just dive in and don't worry too much if it's ugly or if it's buggy or whatever. Worry about that. Think about it. try and build a good app, but don't get stuck in minutia. Secondly, if you happen to be building your own app, I recently released a video which explains my personal process for designing a new Android application. That video, did I write down what it's called? Yep. So the video is titled "A Simple Way to Design a New App." And basically what I do is I explain to you, okay, let's say you've got an idea, you've got a workout log, for example. How do you go from I want to build a workout log to like a list of features to sketches to code? So go check out that video if you want. And step number 5, and this is the last thing. Actually, I do have a bonus, but this is the last step, number 5. My suggestion would be to set up a GitHub account. I can't remember exactly what the basic account is, like $7 or something a month. They do have some student deals, I believe. I'm not their friggin' sales rep. Set up a GitHub account or some kind of repository or revision control system. It doesn't have to be GitHub. It's just, it kind of has to be GitHub because anyone uses GitHub. It works really well. And if you want to take it a step further, you can even publish your crappy, or maybe you wrote a good app, publish your app to the Play Store. Don't expect it to do well, but maybe have your friends download it and rate it and stuff like that and give feedback. It's kind of fun to see, hey, I built this thing, it's now available for download. So that's kind of a, do you need to do that? No. Is it helpful to learn the process of deploying an app to Google Play or the process of deploying your code to a revision control system like GitHub? Is it useful to have a GitHub repository on the web that you can show to developers? Yes. So think about that. All right. So that's the basic thing. I have one more bonus, and this is only peripherally related to this thing, but it's still something that's really important. One of the best investments of my time and learning was taking or learning about how to learn. I'm going to share with you some experience which I might actually surprise some people. Some people it won't surprise at all because they've been in this position, but it might seem funny, but I actually had a really hard time learning the basics of a programming language. My brain does not learn by reading textbooks very well. My brain does not learn from reading words, particularly when it comes to programming. One of the most difficult obstacles you will face is that, and this will change depending on how your brain works and your preferred learning modalities. The main thing is sometimes, let's say you want to learn some complicated topic, like a recyclerview, which is complicated for a beginner. I know now from personal experience that the best way for me to learn new APIs, new things on Android, new things in programming, is to do two things. I will make sketches. I will make kind of notes. So this is the first page that I just grabbed beside me. This doesn't actually have anything to do with Android, but this will demonstrate what I'm talking about. This is my process for learning quickly. I was reading this book on, the book was called Buddha's brain, and it talks about the neuroscience behind meditation and things like that. And I was learning about how the brain works. So I know that the worst way for me to actually learn is to just write down a bunch of words. What I do is I draw pictures. So this is beside programming, but like here's an image of the ugly diagram of the brain, like the lizard brain, the mammalian, what was it, paleo-mammalian brain, and then the neocortex. So make little notes with pictures if you're a visual thinker like I am. So that's the first thing. And then write code. This is the most important thing. When you're learning a new API, let's say you're learning RxJava, you're learning how to build the recyclerview, you're learning how to use Mockito, you're learning how to use Firebase, I would strongly suggest make an example app. Not an app you plan on releasing, a sample app which only does the thing that you want to learn. And what that does is it's like the most active form of learning code really out there. Now, maybe you are some kind of savant and you can actually just read a textbook and understand it like that. I'm not like that. And that's basically it. So to wrap that up, figure out your own learning process and understand that maybe reading walls of jargon is not going to be very helpful to you. Maybe you need to find a different resource. That's basically it for that question. I know that was long-winded, but hopefully that was useful for people. Done. Let's move on. I'm just going to take a quick break here because I am a little bit out of breath. Okay. I think what I'm going to do, that was a super long, super long discussion. And what I'm going to do, I'm only going to answer one or two more questions, and I'm going to call it a day there. So I have a question from Deepak, and what he's asking, he's saying he's an Android developer, and he wants to know the future of application development. So I'm only just going to give some random thoughts because actually no one really knows that question to an absolute degree of certainty. However, if you look at the way that technology is advancing, I think it's safe to make a number of assumptions. One of the biggest things I thought about recently is that I'm quite certain, but I don't know when, but I'm quite certain there will come a time pretty soon, probably within the next 5 to 10 years, where global high-speed internet is widely available. So the thing about that, the way, and this is just pure speculation, please don't listen to me. This is just me throwing my thoughts on this topic out there. I think what's going to happen is, unfortunately, I'm not saying the Android platform will go away. I don't think that will happen because Android is really friggin' awesome. However, when it comes to writing mobile applications, what I'm kind of thinking is if everyone has high-speed internet, like faster than we have, on these things, to me it kind of makes sense to start hosting more and more of an application's architecture on a server as opposed to holding a lot of it on the phone. This is just me rambling. I think probably what might happen is that these things are going to become views mostly, the device, and even like click events, I'm kind of imagining those click events just getting forwarded to a web server, because if we have super high-speed internet that everyone has, which I don't know if that will happen, I'm just assuming it will. Elon Musk talked about it, so he likes to get things done. I think at that point it'll just make sense to have this thing as basically a view in even like software architecture. Maybe I have a thing. Do I have a thing I could share? And I'm going to shut up after this question. But the way I kind of look at it, so this is just an architecture diagram, and up here is the view, the visual stuff. I think what's going to happen, and I could be wrong, I'd love to hear other people's opinions on this. I think the device will mostly just become a view, and then we will move, like, probably not the use cases, I don't know, but we're probably going to move like this, all that stuff onto cloud servers. That would be my guess. There's lots of other interesting things happening, like we've got artificial intelligence, which will probably be able to write simple mobile apps. So you'll probably want to be a person who writes the artificial intelligence who writes the app, because maybe that will take over. It's all up in the air. Who knows? I don't particularly. One more question or comment, and then I'm going to call it a day. Let's look at Respect Tech had a question that I said I was going to answer, so I will try. Okay, this is a great question from Respect Tech. Okay, so I'll have to let me just sort this out. It's a somewhat lengthy question, so let me just kind of summarize it. Okay. Actually, I won't rephrase it so much, but okay, so the question was, Respect Tech is he's doing form validation with what appears to be 2 edit texts and a button, and checking whether they are empty or not. And he's using RX Java 2 to help with this, but he's not sure if he should put this RX Java code in the presenter or keep it in the view. And he's trying to use model view presenter. Okay, so this is interesting. Let me think about this for a minute. Form validation. Unfortunately, I don't know if I have enough details about your implementation to give you a super accurate answer. So I will try and just answer what I think might help. So the first thing I would say is, so in my architecture, I can't think of a single place where I would use RX Java in my view. Now, this is, does everyone make Android apps like me? Absolutely not. Does everyone do model view presenter like me? Absolutely not. I personally do model view presenter passive view, which is a subset. I can't think of a use case where I would want RX Java 2 in my view. And to be perfectly honest, I can't really think of a scenario where I would need to have my view communicating with my presenter through RX Java. All of the time, I will have my presenter talking to the services through RX Java. Again, I had a diagram about this somewhere. I don't know if I have it handy, unfortunately. Let me have a quick look. No, I don't have it on me, unfortunately, but oh, I do. Just my high-tech filing cabinet system. So just to kind of roundabout answer your question, the way that I would approach this is all the views, that doesn't really help so much yet, but in my opinion, the way I approach Model View Presenter, to answer your question, is the view would not do any of the form validation. How I would approach this is, let me go to some code and that'll help instead of just talking about it. So let's go to, this is Profiler. It's an open source repository. It needs to be updated, but this might help. And I'm going to go to, what would that be? Login presenter. And I'll also open up login fragment. So login fragment will be my view. And login presenter will be my presenter. And let's see here. And this is basically my form validation. Now, I'm not saying you do form validation like I do. However, the way that I would approach it is, of course, so you've got a button that the user presses. I know that much. You got a button which is probably like a login button. So you hit the login button, and then how I would approach this is I would have a method, obviously, in the presenter on login click, which fires when the button gets pressed. I ask the view for the email and the password. I would actually do this a little differently now. Instead of asking for a view, asking the view for like these little single variables, I would actually create like a view model and then just say like view.getViewModel, but whatever, let's just not tangent. The fundamental, here's the thing. My suggestion is don't have any RxJava in your view. The way I approach this is your view forwards click events to the presenter, and the presenter can ask it for what it needs. So the presenter can be like, I see that you have been clicked. What do you have in your text fields? And then the presenter will look at that and do the form validation. Now, within the presenter, if you have a form validation library, which your presenter is talking to, absolutely, if you want to use RxJava for that, that to me makes sense. To end the question, I don't really see a use case for RxJava in a view and Model View Presenter. Is there a use case out there? Maybe. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Take care.